89.7 FM. We are so excited that you're choosing to listen to us today. We're going to be telling you a very, very special story about a puppet named Mipso. As you all know, we don't make any money from this, so we will be accepting donations today. Please make the checks out to the cool girl in the back. Yes, that one. Now please enjoy Church Coffee, where Garrett is playing Matt, Brian is playing Mipso, Sarver is playing the narrator, and the girls are puppets.
Matt had finally locked the the outside door, as the last lingering late-night church attendee retired from the Luna Pier Methodist Church. As he made his way back to the chapel, he thought of how his younger self would feel if he knew he became a youth pastor. He knew it was only 9:23 p.m. and that it was way too early to be exhausted. That didn't stop him. He also knew that before he could leave, he had to speak to a friend, and he had to open the door for the others. He walked through the double doors of the chapel and slid a rubber plant in front of one for them. Then he walked to the pew at the front of the room and sat beside an ugly church puppet made by an old woman years ago that was no longer loyal to the church. The puppet's name was Mipso. Mipso hung his head down, almost embarrassed by how terrible he felt that day. The other puppets had already scuffled past Matt and gone downstairs to brew up some coffee as their day was just starting. Off in the corner of the chapel, the baby Jesus figurine stood yelling at one of the miniature wise men about some sort of money he owed baby Jesus. It was obviously a bad day for the nativity scene members. Some sock puppets that were made a few weeks before by the Sunday school children were already doing their best to break open the communion bag of bread. Matt looked down at Mipso, already prepared for pessimism.
Rough day on the job, Mip?
I wouldn't count being a puppet as a career, Matt. It's kind of like being a youth pastor.
Matt laughed, almost in agreement with his ugly puppet friend. There was a moment of silence between the two, but it was broken by the other puppets storming into the chapel with pots of coffee they brewed minutes ago in the church's kitchen. Dolly, a newcomer, grabbed the small cups used for communion to serve coffee to her puppet peers. She was a brand new puppet that had recently been purchased on sale from Blaine's Farm and Fleet and unanimously liked by the puppet population of the church.
You want some, Mipso? Matt?
Mip stopped groveling and looked up for a moment to see Greg, an elderly green puppet that used to have some sort of resemblance to one of the prophets, most likely Moses or Ezekiel, but no one can tell now. Greg stood inches away from Mip's fuzzy face, smiling widely and offering him a cup of hot church coffee.
Thanks, Greg.
Mipso grabbed the warm plastic cup with his puppet hands. Greg handed the other cup to Matt, then shuffled away to do his daily devotional. Mipso took a large but puppet-sized swallow of the coffee.
Absolutely disgusting. I hate church coffee.
All you've ever had is church coffee.
Exactly why I hate it.
This comment made Matt laugh. The thought of a puppet having enough energy to hate things with so much passion amused him.
What's up, man? You seem worse than last week.
I don't know, it's just the usual puppet complex. Plus some kid urinated on Cindy today and that put us all in a mood.
Matt turned to see Cindy, a pink and sparkly princess puppet sitting in the shallow pool of holy water that was used to baptize 2 little girls that day. Cindy looked very upset.
Out of all the puppets I know, you seem to be the only one with a complex.
That's because these dolls can't see life beyond church coffee and Bible kid saliva.
Matt couldn't help but smile. He always found himself entertained by Mipso's cynicism.
Does this have anything to do with what you mentioned to me last Sunday?
Mipso had revealed to Matt 1 week before that he was utterly, insensibly, and incredibly in love with the pastor's wife, Donna.
Oh, you mean when I mentioned to you in confidence that I'm utterly, insensibly, and incredibly in love with Donna? Yeah, man, that's still on my mind.
Mipso took another sip of his coffee, still disappointed with the taste. Matt searched for the right words to make a pessimistic puppet somehow content.
What? Is it about her?
Well,
Mipso looked at the pew where she sat today in church.
it's just when I see her, it's like I can hear classical music playing or something. I don't know.
Is she what sparked the whole I want to be more than just a puppet life perspective?
Matt asked, trying to understand why Mipso seemed to feel more than all the other puppets. Matt had never met a more ambitious and dissatisfied puppet. Although he was only 21 and figured he had a lot more stubborn puppets to meet before his time as a youth pastor was over.
It's like this. You see how she isn't amused by lackluster conversation, and how she looks out the window during church service because you know she wants to experience as much as a human can experience. And it makes me want to experience it with her, you know? By her side. I guess I just look around at my friends, and I can't comprehend wanting more than this. Maybe my love story is a grandeur idea, but I keep craving a human experience.
Matt looked into Mip's eyes that happened to be made of plastic buttons from the arts and crafts store down the road. Tried to make Mip hear what he thought the little guy needed to hear.
But you aren't a human. You're a puppet.
Mip didn't turn away, or cry, or even move at all. He took a moment to process what his friend had said to him. The church seemed quieter than Mipso had ever heard it before.
What makes a puppet different from a person?
Mipso actually wanted an explanation. Matt could see it in his buttons. But the pastor was dumbfounded, considering that the answer to this question should have been obvious to him and somehow wasn't. There wasn't an answer for Matt to know. If there was one, he couldn't find it. He tried to find it. His eyes searched around the room, but all he saw were the rest of the church puppets that had given up their own Sunday activities and were seated at the feet of the two, trying but failing to understand Mipso's desire for the human experience. It was then that Matt could see Mip's grand uniqueness from the crowd and his common ground with humanity. Despite the other puppets' lack of understanding, they finally recognized that Mipso belonged outside the church walls to exist in reality for a while, if not for the rest of his puppet life. Mipso set down his last cup of coffee and held his arms open toward Matt, hoping the pastor would respond. Matt lifted his friend into his arms like a companion and unlike a superior. Together, they walked out of the open chapel doors.